Pixel Sift is proudly supported by Murdoch University School of Arts. Now, creative industries, they're changing all the time, and at Murdoch University School of Arts, you can study a degree that'll keep up with the fast pace of modern media. It's designed in consultation with industry and business, and the new Bachelor of Creative Media allows you to specialise in sound, graphic design, screen production, photography, or games art and design, one of our favourites. Who knows, you might end up like a guest on the show, like Matthew Sear and Jack Gem from Artisans Games, who joined us on episode 78, and they studied here right at Murdoch.
Fantastic.
You can build your portfolio and showcase your creative potential and learn some cross-disciplinary skills that the modern workforce needs. Apply for Murdoch's Bachelor of Creative Media now. You can search for Murdoch University and head to the website for more information, and Murdoch University School of Arts is proudly supporting Pixel Sift. Hello, and thank you for joining us on Pixel Sift. My name is Gianni, and today we're back in the studio. And Scott, who feels like he's been away for a long time, is here.
Yes. Hello,
Scott.
hello. It's good to be back, I guess.
You've been here all the time.
I've been here the whole time.
He just has been hanging out in the background. We've also got Mitch, but he's probably furiously staring at the stream controls, trying to make them all work. He's there. But joining us as well, over the magic of the internet, we've got Michael Chu, who's joining us from Shadowplay Studios. Michael, thanks for joining us. We're looking forward to talking all about your game, Projection.
Hey there, glad to be here.
We'll be learning all about that. But what else are we coming up with in the show today, Scott?
We'll also be taking a look at our own gaming skills as journalists. Should we be expected to be good at them before we start talking about them?
Good question. Let's jump in, shall we?
Pixel Sift. Pixel Sift. No, seriously, Pixel Sift. No, seriously.
Pixel Sift. So the gaming skill of journalists was called into question last month when a video was released of GamesBeat's lead writer Dean Takahashi fumbling his way through the yet-to-be-released Cuphead. And he's been copying a lot of flack online for it ever since. And obviously it's something very close to us because we'd like to think we're somewhat of journalists doing this sort of thing.
I don't know. We spent a lot of time trying to get the studio working today, but we'll see how we go.
That's a whole other bag.
Yeah.
But yeah, the question is, do journalists need to be good at games?
It's an interesting one, and I think for me it seems to be that this has been one of these kind of recurring conversations that we've had about people who play games, and that there's a certain characteristic that gamers have to be, and for me it feels a bit like gatekeeping when we talk about people who are, you've got to be good at games to play them, you've got to play the specific time, otherwise you're a casual gamer, or any of these sort of conversations, or people talk about, fake geek girls and stuff like that, and saying that if you play in a different way that's outside of this particular subset, then you don't fit into the category and you shouldn't be playing games at all.
Which is all sorts of wrong. It's very elitist and a very anti-community. To say if you're doing something differently to how we do it, then you're not doing it properly.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in as well with this. It sounds like it's a recurring idea that keeps coming up, like about games journalism. So we've seen this before. And it really kind of depends who the audience is as well, in my opinion. It's not just whether game journalists in general should be good or bad, because I can imagine there's a lot of journalists who make a living off not knowing how to play the game, and that's how they market themselves as well, and that's because they understand their audience. So the audience really does also play a big part in this, and it's setting up expectations, I think, especially as well in this case with Cuphead. He's got his own following, and when I saw it for the first time, it wasn't like he's bad at the game. He admits it to himself, but it's what you take back from this.
Sure, and to be fair, Cuphead looks like a really hard game.
I did get a chance to play it. It is super hard.
Yeah, see. The thing, I have an interesting question for developers, for a developer as yourself, Michael. Do developers need to be good at games to create games?
Okay, so what kind of games are we talking about?
Well, exactly.
Here?
It was the same kind of question. It's more of just a kind of rhetorical question. Is that like to be a part of the community, you don't necessarily need to excel at it. I don't think in aspects that aren't your thing. You know, like a developer doesn't have to be amazing at playing games because they bloody make them. Yeah. We don't have to be great at making games because we talk about them.
It's an interesting scenario because when we talk about being good at a game, there's an implication that a game is something that you have to progress through, that's something that you've got to achieve, which is not the case really anymore. Yeah. Games are about so much more. It doesn't have to be about winning the game. A lot more of the time, it's about the experience. I look at something like Abzu, which is a lot more of a meditation game, just enjoying watching like an aquarium sort of situation. And even that question is like, can you be good at Abzu or like bad at Abzu? And so that comes into question as well. Like you can't like say that you're going to be good at this genre. Even the idea of genres is being broken down. And so when we come into creating a game, it's more about the experience that you want to deliver, and whether you're good or bad at it, what's important is whether that experience was translated across, and whether this is what the developer intended, and whether that's what the player got in return, and how successful that was translated. And it doesn't matter if they took half an hour to an hour to someone else who took like 4 hours, because I saw Monument Valley, some people breeze through the puzzles, but some people take 2 hours, but in the end they both got the same experience, right? And that's what's important.
Yeah, they couldn't have said it better.
I think it's really interesting. Like, exactly the game that popped into my head is that, no one is going to be the world's best at Journey or something like that on the PlayStation 4, because it's just it's not the type of game that it has to be.
Well, like Michael said, it's an experience, and a lot of games are these days. Go on.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And I think what you said at the beginning, Michael, was really an important point, is that the audience for someone who reads, because Dean Takahashi writes for VentureBeat, which is sort of business-focused audience. It's for a different type of player, or even people who are interested in the gaming industry, to the people who kind of were looking at this video and saying this person wasn't particularly good at it. And as you said, he made a kind of a point of saying, look at me kind of embarrass myself for the first.
It was funny.
Yeah, and it was it was sort of a tongue-in-cheek sort of conversation.
Sorry, go, Michael.
Go on. Oh, okay. I was going to say, it looked like it was taken a bit out of context, and even Ian Miles Chong, who was putting up a Twitter about game journalists are incredibly bad at video games, and then he himself is one. I feel like there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek with that, right? It's like, if he's serious, then, well, it's just an opinion, but my take of it was that he's just poking fun at the situation as well. But then suddenly the comments came in, and it's suddenly a division between two sides. I was like, oh, okay, this kind of got out of hand.
As far as journalists go, I mean, especially the kind of journalism we do, I mean, we don't do reviews specifically because we don't think we have, the experience or skill set to be making calls like that on whether this game is good, etc. We more like to, as people who listen to the show will know, we do this topical, almost cultural discussions around gaming. And I don't think my ability to play games feeds my ability to discuss them at all. Even though I don't think I'm a bad gamer. I mean, I suck at some games for sure, but funnily enough, they're usually the type of games that I don't play.
Yeah, and there's 100 million different types of games out there.
Sure.
People often say that, gaming is an extremely popular thing. 70% of people play games regularly, but they may not all be the console games. They might be playing games on their phone, or they might be playing games online.
Look at other sports as well. I mean, you've got, let's say in Australia, we've got AFL, or football for our international listeners of any type. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You've got your commentators and you've got your blah, blah, blah. And there's different levels of experience and knowledge. Nobody expects a sports journalist, just a journalist, someone who's come through the ranks of training through to be a journalist, not an ex-footy player or whatever.
Yeah.
No one expects them to don boots and bag some goals.
The Dennis Comettis of the world.
Exactly. You can be a good journalist regardless of your flair or talent, I think, in regards to the actual skill set that they're discussing.
Yeah, and I think I guess the final thing we'll kind of say on that is that I think that there is plenty of different types of games and plenty of different types of players, and the audiences are all out there. And one of the best things about the internet is that it allows audiences to find the sort of thing that they're really interested in, and they can go and find the voice that speaks to them.
I will say one more thing before we leave this topic.
Yep.
I think a lot of the backlash from the whole thing is like the toxicity that comes with the gaming communities. Sometimes you get, and I can understand it because, like, on the outside looking in, this journalists getting access to games and getting to play all these things that a lot of people are going to be jealous of.
Mm-hmm.
But jealousy or even envy is no reason to be toxic. You might not agree with them or me, but it doesn't give you any more right or place to attack them.
It's a very good point.
Be mindful of what you say on the internet, kids.
That too, yeah.
That's exactly right. It's going to stay there forever. Let's jump into our next topic, shall we?
Did you know PixelSift is available on other platforms? You can find previous episodes on iTunes, Pocket Casts, YouTube, and on the PixelSift website.
Joining us today is Michael Chu. He's a designer from Shadowplay Studios, and we're going to be talking all about his PAX Australia Indie Showcase selected game Projection. Now, Michael, tell us a little bit about your game. If people haven't seen it, could you describe what it is?
Okay, certainly. Projection is a 2D shadow puppet platformer. It's going to be exploring different cultures, specifically World Heritage art from Indonesia, China, Greece, Turkey, and England. There's also some German shadow puppets in there. So we're trying to make sure that we're looking at very real, authentic shadow puppets, and we're doing a lot of research into that. But the actual mechanic of the game is about light manipulation. So if you are in a world of shadows and you walk on shadows, whoever controls the light basically controls the world, because they can cast shadows with this light. They can walk on those shadows. They can move objects with these shadows. So everything about it is around this one mechanic. And so that plays throughout the entire game. So yeah, I hope that's a good summary of it.
Yeah, looking at the trailer, I think when I first started watching it, I'm like, oh, shadow puppets. And the first thing that jumped into my head was the Indonesian style, Javanese style shadow puppets that they have. I remember watching a lot of those as a kid, seeing the actual presentations.
Oh, good.
And so I was like, oh, wow. And then at the end of the trailer, there's that specific sort of Indonesian style puppet at the end, which is really, really cool. And I'm curious to know how you're kind of working in and the shadow puppets from these other cultures, and what sort of things have you learnt about the similarities and I guess the differences between how people experience stories through light and shadow.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so well, the idea behind going into shadow puppets came from the main mechanic. We started messing around with light, and then my artist Yosha saw it and was like, you know what, that could work with shadow puppets. And so from there it was like, oh, you know what, let's do this. And we started off, as you said, with the Javanese wayang kulit, is what they call it. And the game was being made at a game jam, so it was only in 48 hours. I just did a lot of Googling images and then just randomly picking things. Not
Puppet
much research at that time. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But afterwards, when we figured this is something that we want to work on, we went to visit a shadow puppeteer in Australia. His name's Richard Bradshaw. He makes shadow puppets for ABC, which is the broadcast for kids, and he does a lot of shadow puppets on TV shows and things like that. And it was after speaking to him, we got to see a lot of the shadow puppets that he'd made, how it's set up, what it looks like, what the material is made out of, how they move, and things like that, how you can work with shadow puppets to try and make it as authentic as possible. And what he did was he explained that it started off in Chinese and Indonesian roots. And so that if we were going to make a game which explores these cultures, we should start off with Indonesia and China, and then start moving gradually to the other countries. And so at that point, it's when we started to explore and read up on them. In terms of similarities, well, they're all 2D, but in general, like something that we want to maintain throughout all of them is that you can see the rods which are holding them up. That every time they turn around, you see that's like a piece of paper that's being flipped. All sorts of things to try and remind you of that. And also music as well is a very important part to this. Quite often when they're doing a shadow puppet show, you can't have a whole orchestra there for you, and even times it's just silent. And so we wanted to draw inspiration from that as well, making sure that we use the authentic instruments that were there, and try and reflect that within the game as well.
I'm curious, Michael, when you're designing the characters in the game, did you draw any, like, I guess, how's the way to say this? Basically, I want to know, did you make the puppets in game, like, as real or as close to how they would be in real life, or did you kind of cut a few corners and use some trickery of digital magic?
Okay, right. So when we were making them, at the time I was just doing something really quick, but they are very much based on the real shadow puppets. So as I mentioned, Richard Bradshaw showed us and even gave us some shadow puppets to get to learn how they work. And so if you look closely at the Indonesian shadow puppets, you'll see that their legs don't actually move, only their arms. We want to try and keep that as close to the real shadow puppet as possible. We went to showcase the game at Riverside Theatre at one stage, not only because it was mixing games and art, except games are art. What was interesting was that they thought it was an actual shadow puppet as well. And we're like, no, we just drew pictures and models, and made it like that. So we tried to be as close to the source material as possible. You might see a little bit of trickery. The main character, Greta, might have a little bit more movement than she should possibly actually have. But everyone else, especially when we're exploring different cultures, we definitely want to try and keep that as close to the real thing as possible.
Was it really validating to have people think that you actually made real shadow puppets?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. That was amazing to hear that kind of feedback. I was like, oh, well, haha, it's not actually. We'll see if we can trick more people with our game.
So you've been working on this game for a little while. You said you made it in sort of 48 hours initially in a game jam. Scott actually had the opportunity to play it a while ago now. And
I did, yeah.
And I guess we wanted to see sort of at that point where Scott would have played it, what sort of things did you remember from the actual game, Scott?
Well, as it's still kind of the case, it's the beautiful artwork, and the lead character. What was her name? Sorry, there, Michael.
Greta.
It's got some very much Prismo from Adventure Time inspired things for me going on there. But I was wondering, because I know that this is the second kind of build of the game. Originally, I think it was in Game Maker, and you've moved to Unity.
Yep.
So how much in the time that I played it, and I'm not exactly sure when it was. I'm sure you have a better idea of when it was sent over for a play up at SK. But in the time, how much has changed, and what's changed?
Yeah. All right. So in the time that you played it, it was still made in Game Maker. So it was very rough. We managed to get an art style down, but you might have noticed things like the shadows were only being cast on boxes, like very flat sort of shapes. Also, only the main character was really being affected by the light. So since changing to Unity, not only are we now dynamically working with all sorts of objects, we've got a lot more physics happening in there. So there's a lot more puzzles based around, say, dropping a box down a slope that you've created with shadows, or pushing a door open using shadows again. And so those we couldn't do before in Game Maker. I'm sure there's a way to be able to do that. But when I was making it, we were starting to get a lot of problems, and changing to Unity meant a number of things. Also, like, it was easier to put it onto consoles and things like that. But we were able to mess around with a lot more physics-based puzzles. And on top of that as well, since you've played it, we've had a overhaul of the story, how the game works. It's still a puzzle platformer, but there's a lot more interactions, a lot more story points. So just progression in general, and hopefully players will get to see that at PAX.
Fantastic.
What was the process like of applying for PAX for the showcase and then finding out that you were actually selected as one of the sort of flagship games of the convention?
Yeah, no, it's very exciting to be as a flagship game. But so we made a submission, and we weren't really sure how it would go. We were always excited to think about it, but it wasn't submitting itself wasn't that difficult. It was more of a surprise when we got the email back. I was actually in Seattle for Casual Connect, and I didn't have internet at the time over there, and so I when I was at the hotel, I'm suddenly getting a call. We need to get information back about PAX. They want a response quick. Like, what? What's this about PAX? And then like Ben from Blowfish Studios, who's now a publisher, was like, you got in. I was like, oh wow, awesome. So we got really excited at that point. High fives around and things like that.
Best trip ever. So what are you doing to kind of build it out before people get hands on it sort of next month? Yeah, very soon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no.
Sorry.
So
No pressure or anything.
Yeah, no. We are trying very hard to get as much in. Like we've got a build for PAX, so there's not going to be any more changes to that. But we have a deadline by the end of this year to try and finish everything so that we can release for next year. So there's going to be a lot more play testing that's going to be involved, so that we know what will work and what doesn't work. Because as part of making a story, we have to have a dramatic arc, a sort of a climax towards the end, and so we need to make sure that payoff works, so that when players get through it, they feel satisfied by the end. And so while there won't be any great additions into the game at PAX, we will be working hard on it. And for that note, what you'll play at PAX, hopefully you'll see her first foray into the Javanese culture. You'll get to play some of the early puzzles in there. We haven't put all of them in, and you'll maybe fight a boss inside of that one as well.
Michael, you've been working on this game for a little while, and I'm just sort of curious about now. You're kind of adding a few extra people to the team to kind of bolster out the progress of the game. How many people have been working on this, and what's it like working in a team like of that size, and then adding more people to it close to the end, I guess, or maybe not close to the end, but close to the public display.
Right.
Of it.
Yeah. So Blowfish Studios just came on very recently, but most of the time it's been three of us working on it. Myself as a designer, Yosha as an artist, and Brian as a programmer. And so initially, I think it was 2.5 to even 3 years ago now, was when it was conceptualized at a game jam. The theme was about so close. And so that's where the lights came in, about moving a light far and close. And that was just me by myself working on the game. During that time, I was making a game a week. So I made about 60 games throughout the year. And then at the game jam after that, which was the global game jam, I made a prototype. And this is when Yosha came on board. And that was a great boon, because then he started coming up with a whole lot of ideas, assets, and things like that. And so the two of us were working hard on it, and that's when I hit a limitation on GameMaker, which is when I introduced the third party to our team to help me convert it into Unity. And so then, since then, it's been the three of us, and we went quiet for a little while as we were shifting it from GameMaker into Unity. And that process has been, it's been necessary. I like being able to work alone, but then being able to work with people, it's a lot more fun because it's not just you by yourself all the time. But it's also meant that I have someone that I can call on and use their expertise as well. So it's been great to have these guys come on board.
Now, you mentioned the change to Unity again, and before you did say that one of the advantages of that is that you can create it for or put it onto many more platforms. What do you plan to release it on?
All right, so first of all, we're putting it onto Steam and then onto some consoles. I won't say exactly which ones.
Very cool.
I'm not sure yet. But I think we'll have a reveal at PAX and a few giveaways of consoles as well. So we'll see.
That's great. And we mentioned it before, but the game journey, I feel like this could be, a similar kind of success as that. I think it's, in the same kind of vein as far as, the artistic and the beauty and the puzzle.
Is it
thank you.
Is it a kind of a chilled game, or is there a stressful moment? Is it challenging? Like, what does it feel like to play?
Well, what's interesting about the light mechanics is because they're very organic, you can move the lights and try and solve puzzles in your own way. We tried to make it a bit more, well, not exactly relaxed, but you shouldn't have to do any very dexterity-heavy gameplay inputs. So you don't have to run, jump, and move the light at the same time. You should be able to look at a puzzle, stop, think about where the light should go, and then be able to solve it. That said, I have seen people speed run the game. I have jumping through a whole lot of loops, and I'm okay with that. I do that myself. And it's like, if you can speed run it, then sure. And it's because, the light, it can go to wherever you want, and I'm still finding out ways of completing puzzles that people are coming up with. Sometimes I'm just like, oh, dang it, but it's also really cool to see what people are coming up with.
Now, people can come and, break your game in multiple different ways and find different solutions to your thing.
We've got a good history of that.
At PAX Australia. Look, we've got a good history of breaking games, so we're happy to come down to PAX Australia and break it for you.
Bash for you.
Michael, if people want to find out a bit more about it ahead of PAX, or if they're not able to go along, where's the best place for them to find out some more information?
Yep. Go to www.shadowplaystudios.com. You can find out all the information about it from there. You can also follow us on Twitter. We haven't got a handle for it, but we do use #ProjectionGame, and so you'll be finding out any information on that. We do like to try and release information on Screenshot Saturdays, so you can keep updated on those days.
And if people want to give you a follow, are you posting stuff on your own account? Is that the...
Normally it's Yosha.
Okay.
I leave the Twitter. I'm not very great with Twitter. It should be easy by now. But yeah, no, certainly. Any responses to this that Yosha makes, which is at Hoza.
Yeah, double A at the end.
Yes, double A.
Yeah, we made that mistake before.
Mine is at Misk08. Anything I say is important, so make sure you reply to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So you can definitely follow us on Twitter.
Well, look, Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We're very excited to come down and give it a go at PAX Australia next month. We'll be sticking up links to videos of the game, and you can see all the great screenshots. You can see Yosha's phenomenal artwork. He's a real star, that guy. Thank you very much to Murdoch University School of Arts for sponsoring the show. They help us make this show every week, so it's really helpful for them to do that. So we really appreciate it. You can find links to everything on our website, which is www.pixelsift.com.au. Scott, now we've got some previous episodes. We're almost about to hit 80 next week.
That's it, the big 80.
80, 2 years of the podcast.
Yep.
Where can people go if they want to listen to some of our old stuff?
People, you can go to facebook.com/pixelsift, twitter.com/pixelsift, twitch.tv/pixelsift, and youtube.com/pixelsiftaU.
Pistol Shrimp,
yeah. It's starting to get a bit slurry there, sorry.
We've also, on social media, PixelSift is the account. You'll be able to find it there.
Yeah. We are now officially live video streaming out on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook live channels. So big shouts out if you've been watching on one of those.
And if you've got a moment, we'd love a rating or a review on your podcast platform of choice.
That's it.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us. We're looking forward to playing your game at PAX this year, and congratulations for being selected.
Oh, thank you very much.
Cheers, Michael.
See you then.